Okay, welcome back. This will be week 4 of my vlog from my nursing or student nursing mental health experience over in Finland. This week I'm going to be talking about two things. One is the rehabilitation kind of service that I'm currently in, and the second is touching a little bit on attitudes and perhaps expectations towards care. So with the rehabilitation unit that I'm actually in at the moment, some of the things that I found really interesting is the kind of I spoke a little bit about autonomy in the previous weeks, and there's a real kind of ideal of people need to try and help themselves. For example, like routine is provided, but it's not kind of staff aren't overly involved. It's very much kind of like kind of this is the set routine. This is something that we're expecting that you will take part in whilst you're in the rehabilitation unit, which is only open Monday to Friday. It is 24 hours a day, but I kind of think that's quite interesting in the fact that it kind of places that responsibility on the service user, rightly or wrongly. But I think from experience, having only been there for a week, it kind of looks like it works kind of well, really. I think people kind of buy into the idea that actually this is what they're coming for. This is kind of, there is help available. Staff obviously do become involved in care, and there's lots of other things that go on, but I think they're kind of like a daily routine just to try and kind of help people who come from both hospital and from the community. And it makes for quite an interesting service about how people come, their expectations of what they kind of need to get out of it. In particular, for one person who'd said they just need some structured routine, and that would help with their kind of daily life. So yeah, I kind of think that's quite an interesting service. Obviously, with it being a rehabilitation service, they also do plan goals for what people need, and I think that it works kind of really well. It kind of suits people that are using the service, but it also suits the service almost in the sense that they kind of know what it is that people want, so they can kind of deliver that rather than kind of delivering everything else that may kind of, I don't know, perhaps interfere a little bit with kind of the direction of where people want to get to. In particular, one thing I did want to explain about was we played a board game with some of the people in the rehabilitation unit. Not something I've come across, so possibly likely that we'd probably do have things like this back in the UK. But the board game was very much about about people's lives. Start off, you kind of roll the dice like an average board game, I suppose. But the early in the game, the questions are quite kind of they're not too deep anyway. It's kind of tell me something that you enjoy. Tell me something that you like to do. Kind of what's your favourite food? What do you like to watch on the television? Further around the board, they start to get a little bit more difficult. So it's maybe things like, kind of tell us one method that you might use to try and make sure that you get good sleep at night, or maybe something about like hygiene and personal care. But towards the end, some of the questions are really interesting. Things like, if you're in a challenging situation, how do you deal with that? Or what things would you do to try and make sure that things weren't as difficult as they could potentially become? And I kind of, I suppose from that was kind of thinking about how people's reception towards the game. People kind of took it very literal as a kind of this game is there for your to try and help you a little bit. It's in a group, it's a group activity, so you kind of sharing. It's quite open. It's sure there might be vulnerabilities to people wanting to answer certain questions, but it was kind of really really well kind of orchestrated, and that kind of brings me on to my second point about attitudes and expectations. Just about with the fact that people kind of took that literal, my kind of first thought was, I don't know, like in England, from my experience, I think when you try and do things with people, sometimes people are very quick to perhaps kind of, I don't know, kind of put like either a negative kind of expectation on what it is that you're trying to do. People are very quick to almost see through it. People, I think if you said to somebody back home, look, I've got this game, it's something that might be helpful, people would be very quick to think maybe I don't know, kind of, it's just a game. How is that supposed to help me? I'm in a terrible situation and I don't feel great and things are difficult. So what use is a board game? So it made me think a little bit about, perhaps maybe a little bit of reflection here as well, but people's attitudes and expectations in comparison. And of course, this is, I'm generalising massively here, and I'm sure there's people out there with far greater knowledge or, kind of research may prove me wrong, but it's just from experience. I think in the UK, I think, the NHS, forever, it's in the news, we're in crisis. People are going to the GPs kind of more than ever, and there's so much pressure on services, and I don't know, it kind of really makes me think that we have this like dependency on the healthcare service. Sure, we pay our taxes and, kind of the NHS comes with that. So maybe it is a little bit of kind of like I've paid, so I deserve maybe. But it just makes me wonder whether or not sometimes, it's probably two sides to the coin here, whether sometimes maybe do we expect too much sometimes from the healthcare system, but also maybe do healthcare workers, does the healthcare system try to do too much? I think, kind of mentioning, the whole idea about autonomy over here in Finland, kind of it makes me think that people kind of seem to accept, they have to look after themselves somewhat, and that's kind of part of maybe their recovery or part of their care is, them taking that onus of, I must do this for myself rather than kind of, somebody else must help me to get to that better place. And also that people seem to be accepting of what's on offer. So I don't know, kind of, I don't suppose people kind of expect miracles in the UK. I know that sometimes we can, I think we can all be guilty of expecting something, but we certainly don't expect miracles. But I think people over here, in my experience, have seemed to been really accepting of kind of the service that is offered and what is offered, and there's no kind of, not really kind of questions asked. I suppose that, there are some really kind of like key differences, like in Finland. People have to pay for when they're in care, whether that's upfront or they can pay it over a prolonged period. But maybe maybe that's why people aren't so kind of keen to stick around. Perhaps maybe that's why people are don't mind kind of like the difference in like sectioning laws. If you're sectioned in the UK, section 2 up to 28 days, section 3 can be 6 months, or after that anything up to 12 months, but over here they have like M1, M2, M3, and I think the longest that, touched on this in the first couple of weeks, longest that people have said that you'd expect to see somebody in the hospital environment would be perhaps maybe 2-3 months. Maybe in extreme circumstances people would be in for longer, but it just makes me wonder a little bit about kind of the attitudes of people towards their care, and also as a healthcare professional, kind of actually what is it that we try to do for people? Do we, it's still caring, the fact that you're kind of wanting people to try and help themselves. I think, you're kind of giving that person, you're empowering that person, you're giving them that autonomy that maybe they need to be able to live their life the way that they want to live it. And yeah, it just makes me think whether or not we sometimes do we do a little bit too much maybe, or could we do things differently? So that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I'll be back next week. Thank you very much.